Hello, everyone, and welcome back into another episode of Chop It Up. We have an extremely special episode for you guys today. A good friend of mine, the host of the Locked On Huskies podcast, and the site editor for the Huskies Wire. We have Roman Tomashoff on the pod today. Roman, thank you for coming in.
Carter, as always, it's great to be here.
Yeah, and it's awesome. Unfortunately, we are at the end of football season. With that being said, our Patriots are red hot. The Huskies maybe didn't end the year the way we wanted to. But with that being said, it is Drake May season, and we're going to get to that towards the end of the show here.
Oh,
Roman, I
I
want to
can't
start it
wait.
off. Let's talk about our Washington Huskies. This is the main reason why we're here today. Coming off the loss against Oregon last week, they finished the regular season 8-4. Still not really sure what bowl game they're going to make yet. But with that being said, lots of ups, lots of downs. It was a relatively young team, and even the veteran guys were probably, newer transfers. There weren't a ton of guys, even left from that 2023 team. So a lot of new faces, a lot of young guys on the team, but I want to swing it over to you. What do you kind of make of this 2025 season for you, Dub?
I feel like all in all, it should be viewed as a success because the fact that we are sitting here right now and saying, ah, man, 8-4 was a little bit underwhelming is still a big step in the right direction, right? Because if we're sitting here and you're 9-3, you win that Wisconsin game, which was just so heartbreaking. You're sitting there and saying, this is a very successful step forward. And the fact that you know that there was meat left on the bone. I know something that Jed Fish talked about in at least one of his several press conferences after a loss was, hey, all of these games were like one possession games in the fourth quarter. All of these games were very, very gettable, or 10 points because Ohio State was 17-6, but they were all very, very gettable very late in the contest, which showed that you did take a big step forward. The Ohio State game, the way that Buckeye offense came in and was like, hey, we want to play ball control. We don't want to take a whole lot of big shots against this defense. And maybe part of that was the fact that it's Julian Saint's first start. Maybe part of that is the fact that it was their first road game with a whole lot of new faces on that team as well as part of that. But I feel like still you have to give a lot of credit to what Ryan Walters and the defense did this year. We saw that unit as a whole take a big step forward. And now for Washington's offense, where it's unfortunate that, Jonah Coleman's gone. Denzel Boston is in all likelihood off to the NFL draft. You still have a really solid young core of guys. And if Damon Williams is able to take a big step forward this offseason and just kind of now that he knows what it takes to play against some of these, top teams in the country, some of these truly elite defenses in the conference, if him and Jed Fish can find a way to sit down and say, all right, this didn't work for us this year, but this is what can work for us next year, I feel very confident in where this team is going.
I'm right there with you. I have extreme confidence in this team heading into next year. I was asked on my radio show the other day, would you rather have Damon Williams or Jed Fish? Is it time to give up on Damon? And I said, absolutely not. I
Yeah, no,
think
no
that
way.
Damon Williams, is he, a once in a lifetime talent? Maybe he's not quite there yet, but there's no debating the athleticism that he showcases week in, week out. The arm talent is there. Yes, he struggled in certain games. You can go nitpick the Michigan game, obviously the Oregon game. I would argue that's probably the worst game of the season, just with, the 50% completion percentage, the two interceptions, so on and so forth. But with that being said, he went and won the games that he was supposed to win, really outside of Wisconsin. And that's something you couldn't say for last year's team. You didn't have the blowouts at Iowa and Penn State where halfway into the second quarter, the game's over. You just didn't have that. And like you said, you play the number one team in the nation in your Big Ten opener. You had a chance to take the lead in the fourth quarter. The Michigan game, same thing. If Damon doesn't throw all those interceptions and we're able to move the ball, even heading into the fourth quarter, there was opportunities to go score and win that game. And obviously, we know the Wisconsin one. I'd rather not talk about that. It was
We
what
don't
it
have to do that.
was.
That's okay.
Yeah, and then the Oregon game, I mean, heading into that fourth quarter, if they don't get that big play to Malik Benson, we're getting the ball back down 5 with a chance to
Yeah.
go score and take the lead. And so there's just, you can talk about a play here, a play there. What I do want to see, and we've talked about this before, is just the decision making be a little bit more crisp. And obviously, when I'm watching through TV, you're in the media box most of the time, but you can't see if there's things downfield that aren't open, if he's simply missing guys. It just seems like there's times where he's holding on to the ball a little too much. And as a fan, I would rather have him dish it out to the flat to a guy out there like an Adam Muhammad or a Jonah Coleman, or step ups, obviously run like we know he can do, and go take 4 yards. Every time he runs, it doesn't need to be a 25, 30-yard run like the one against Illinois. It can be a 5 or 6 yard run. And so does that seem like a fair assessment?
No, it absolutely is. Where I think that there certainly have been some struggles, especially holding the ball when there are guys open over the middle of the field, and part of that, probably has to do with his height at a certain extent. Where that's something that's just always going to be a discussion point because he is 5'9", 5'10", whatever it is he's listed at. And I think that you make a lot of great points there because at the same time, it feels like Demond is trying to make himself a drop back passer. I don't think that's a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination because in high school, he was able to win off of superior arm talent and elite athleticism. We know that that is such a big part of his game, but he also knows in order to not just stay healthy in terms of taking hits, but in order to get to the next level, he needs to make sure that he is not just a good decision maker, but he can show NFL teams that he can play for the pocket. He can play in structure. And I think that that's something that we saw a little bit overemphasized this year. I don't want to say that that's a bad thing because it's certainly not, but it's one of those things where as he continues to grow, where we saw it a little bit last year, right? Especially like in the Louisville game, I think we saw him play really well in structure for the most part. And then he has one of the wildest out of structure plays we've ever seen at the end of that game. But I think that's one of the things where you just look at what his career progression has been. I've always been very impressed, like since the first day that I watched him during spring ball when he showed up as a true freshman, with his ability to keep his eyes downfield. But I think sometimes he's just kind of waiting, and this is one of the big things that I think he's going to work on in this offseason and it's something we've seen from college to the NFL, which I'm sure we'll talk about later on. What a college window is and an NFL window in terms of when throws are actually open and when you actually have to just have a little bit of confidence. I'm not saying he lacks in that by any means, and just say, all right, that's the throw. I know this is as open as I'm going to find somebody on this play. I need to just step up and rip it.
Yeah, and I think we saw that a little bit where, he's throwing balls at Denzel Boston that he knows Denzel can go up and get. And obviously now that you're losing him, he's going to have to find trust with those other guys. Now, instead of Denzel, it's going to have to be Raiden Vinesbright, Desmond Roebuck, who had an outstanding year, which when I went up there in August, we kind of knew, hey, like, keep an eye on this guy. The Chris Lawsons of the world, Decker DeGraff at the tight end spot. And we'll see what happens. They bring in two four-star wide receivers. I would like them to go get an experienced guy in the portal. Not that you're just going to go find another Denzel Boston who's a veteran star wide receiver, but I think there will be veteran talent in this year's portal. With that being said, I'm glad you brought up the NFL side of things for Demond. Next year, he's going to be a junior. He hasn't redshirted because of how much he played his freshman year, kind of going dual quarterback system with Will Rogers there. If you had to, bet or, if you had to take a guess, would you say this will be the last year we see Demond on Montlake, or do you think he comes back for a senior campaign?
As of right now, with how this season kind of ended with some struggles in the Wisconsin and the Oregon game, I would say we see him stay for two more. I think that the bigger tell is not just going to be, when we'll get into the summer and hear the draft evaluation. Shout out to my good buddy Connor Rogers over at the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, who they do tremendous work with things like that. If you start seeing Demond's name on some of those lists, I'm sure there are going to be people who are concerned by that. But I think the bigger tell is going to be how the 2026 season goes. Because if he does take that big step forward and he does lead Washington, let's say they go 10-2 and they sneak into the 10 or the 11 seed in the playoffs, I think that that might be when you want to start getting a little nervous about something like that. But as of right now, I would say we see 2 more years of Demond Williams.
Well, that's music to my ears because I think one of the problems, especially in college sports in general, is these guys just take off too early. And I totally get it. If there was a $20 million contract waiting for me and all I had to do was say, yeah, I'm going to go do that, I mean, sign me up any day of the week, twice
Can
on
I have
Sunday.
half of that just like now?
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. But with that being said, I think there is something to staying for that fourth year. You've seen the Bo Nixes and the Michael Penix of the world where, maybe they transfer and they stick it out for another season. And now look what those guys are at. Obviously Nix is having success. Penix is out banged up, but still, I think if they would have just stayed where they were, or if they would have came out of the draft early, you probably don't see them in the position that they're at right now as a starting quarterback in the NFL. And I think with Jed, and kind of one of the big parts of his philosophy is getting guys prepared for the NFL. And I think Demond being able to stay for 2 more years, you get another year to polish things up, you get another run at a playoff, maybe even a national championship, depending on how the talent on that team may look. I really hope that we see Demond on Montlake for 2 more years. But I want to talk about the defense a little bit because it was surprising to me, to be honest, how well this defensive squad performed week in, week out. When I was up there in the summer, I mean, the secondary is going to be good. Alex McLaughlin is looking to kill anyone and everyone. Dakario Davis and Ephesians Prysock, I mean, two lengthy, elite ball hawking DBs. They're going to do what they're going to do. But the front seven really made me nervous, not necessarily the linebacking core, but the defensive line, because as we saw this year, they did lack pressure on the quarterback. But the way they were able to limit the run, especially against teams like Oregon, who can throw three or four running backs at you and they can all be dangerous at any given time. I was really impressed with this group. They are losing quite a few guys. They're losing both the starting cornerbacks that I mentioned. I'm sure they'll lose a couple linebackers. Zach Durfee's gone, but they do have a lot of young talent. So both reviewing this year and heading into next year, what do you make of this Ryan Walters defense?
I was so impressed. One of the biggest things that I was impressed with was Ryan Walters himself, where something I know you and I talked about here on Chop It Up. It's something I talked about a lot over on Locked On Huskies, and it's something Ryan Walters himself has talked about that his base defense was kind of a 5-1-5 look, where you have the bare front with three defensive tackles, pair of outside linebackers, one true inside linebackers, and a nickel package on the back end. He What's the best way to say this? He did such a tremendous job to change his own philosophy. He took the hard look at himself in the mirror that he needed to after getting fired at Purdue and after just really not having a just good stretch there for what was it, 2 years. But he said, all right, I need to adapt. How am I going to do that? And he looked at the personnel that Washington had for him and he said, all right, we can still run what I like in my base coverage a little bit, but he changed into, 4-2-5 with a whole lot of cover three and just a whole lot of other things where he said, this is the talent that I have. This is the best way that I can utilize these guys. Here's how we're going to do it. And I think that was evident, especially in the Ohio State game. That's where we really saw those things start to change, where it was very clear that the game plan was to attack his base defense. And then when he came out with so much cover three, we saw so many of these young guys like Rylan Dillard Allen at safety, Zaydris Rennie Saleh at linebacker throughout the year just continue to grow and grow and grow. And it's so exciting because when you have a defensive coordinator like that who plays such a unique style and is already so naturally aggressive, saying, all right, I'm going to tone it back for right now. And then we can still find different ways to unlock the pass rush. Whereas the Purdue game, there were a couple of really well executed stunts in that game. I know at least one of them led to a sack. When you're able to do different things like that, and then, to just segue that into this 2026 talent. Now you have all these high-end four-star guys like T.I. Mukais and J.D. Hill and Derek Coleman-Brusa coming in here as well, who can be big-time impact athletes for you as pass rushers, hopefully very, very early on in their careers. All of a sudden, that again frees you up to continue to maybe go back to your base look a little bit more, maybe change some other different looks for you on the back end. It's a really exciting thought as Ryan Walters just continues to evolve himself as a coach.
I'm glad you brought up the young guys that they're bringing in this next class, because at some point, as great as their run defense was up front, you have to get to the passer. We saw it in the Oregon game. That's what sticks out the most. You can't give the Dante Moores and the Julian Sayans, 3 to 5 seconds to read a defense back there. No matter how good your secondary is, that's too much time. And so between the two corners that they're losing and the guys up front on the defensive line, who do you expect to replace those guys, and how much more improvement can we see from the defensive line in terms of pass rush heading in the next season?
Yeah, it's a good question where I think that all three of the guys I just mentioned, all three of their top defensive line signees in the 26 class are all going to come in and play some sort of role. I don't know if we're going to see any of them start because, like you said, it seems like Tai Uyunglele is out the door. I wouldn't be surprised if Jed Fish and this coaching staff try to find a way to get a red shirt for, or just an extra year of eligibility for Ontario Thompson at defensive tackle, who really came into his own at the end of the year for the season that he spent in junior college a couple of years ago. So that's just something to keep an eye on. But with Zach Durfee, a couple other guys at nose tackle out the door, I think those are the guys I'm going to be watching. I'm certainly going to be watching the transfer portal very, very heavily because I think that this is a group that still needs more veteran depth. You talked about that at wide receiver. You really need that along the defensive line, whether it be a tackle, an edge rusher, hopefully at least one of both, probably two defensive tackles. There is so much room to continue adding talent to this group. I don't think it's anywhere near finished.
Yeah, I don't think it is either. And I'm glad you brought up the transfer portal, because as great as it is that you're bringing in these young recruits and these big bodies, the reality is they're freshmen. Like, this is going to be their first year of college football. And so at some point when you go to the big house, or you have to face Indiana and Penn State and all these teams that are so disciplined and so strong up front, that experience is going to have to play a role at some point. So whether it's Ontario Thompson coming back, whether it's a big body that you go get through the portal. I think it's paramount that you go get some experience up front to go build some depth to pair along with those younger guys. Kind of segueing into this recruiting class, I want to talk about it. Signing day started Wednesday. It's still kind of going on, but for the most part, things are wrapping up. Washington finished the year ranked 13th according to the 24/7 recruiting rankings in the country. That's the greatest class that they've ever had since these kind of modern rankings came out. A lot of our listeners are kind of, your basic college football fans. They're not sickos like you and I are, where we're looking at every recruit, we're breaking down the film, looking at all this stuff that's exciting to us. But for the basic fan, who are the names that we should keep an eye on? Who's going to be on the field next year? Who are some 3 stars that in a year or two we might be saying, where did this guy come from? What just sticks out to you about this class?
First of all, I'm very proud of all of your listeners out there for not being sickos like you and I. It's as you can see, it can take a toll on you. No, it's the number one guy who you need to watch out for is the number one player in California. That's 5-star offensive tackle Cody Green. When Jed Fish was asked about him at his Wednesday press conference, he said, "Yeah, I expect that guy to come in and start." Like just straight up. And obviously he said, yeah, he's gonna have to battle, he's gonna have to earn it. But somebody just kind of threw out after the fact left tackle, and he just goes, yeah. And I said, oh, all right, this is where we are. And shout out to Cody, a local guy from up here in Seattle who goes down to Mater Dei in California and just winds up as the top player in the state, which is an extremely hard thing to do. I can't remember the last time Washington signed the number one player in the state of California. And for him at 6'6" and 320 pounds to move like that and just be as strong as he is and as intelligent as he is at this point in his high school career is just out of this world. And the fact that he's going to get here in January, that he's going to be able to go through spring ball and summer conditioning, fall camp, all of these other different things that, are really big parts of getting ready to play college football are critical. They're vital. And look at what Washington got on the offensive line this year, where he's saying, oh, a true freshman starting on the offensive line, that never works. Washington had arguably the best freshman in America on the offensive line this year in John Mills. So this coaching staff feels very confident in its ability to have players, the young players especially, up front make some kind of impact. If you go back to Jed Fish's career at Arizona, you see the same thing from Jonas Avanaya, from Wendell Moy. There are a couple other guys too who were freshman All-Americans down there. Like this is something that this coaching staff is very comfortable with, and I think we're going to see a lot from them. One guy who you mentioned, wide receivers, 4-star Jordan Clay, who the Huskies flipped from Baylor on Tuesday night, is a big time win. That kid at 6'3", 200 pounds is an elite athlete on the outside. He can come in and play that X position that Denzel Boston, with him most likely out the door, is leaving open. So I'm really curious to see if he's another one of those guys that maybe is able to come in and start right away. Very curious about that. But you asked for an underrated 3-star guy. I'm going to talk about my favorite player in this 2026 class. 3-star linebacker Ramzak Faroon from Bethel High School, another one here in the greater Seattle area. This kid, I like to call him the missile. At 6'4", 215 pounds, you look at his film, he doesn't just play inside linebacker or outside linebacker. He plays nickel. He plays safety. He's so big and fast and physical, and the way he comes downhill and just hits with authority is so much fun to watch. And I think about that size and length in the middle of the field. You pair that with his former high school teammate and the guy I mentioned earlier, Zadris Rainey Saleh, who at 6'3", 225 pounds is an equally freaky athlete. Those two guys at some point in a year, 2 years down the line in the middle of the defense, this is something that I've heard some rumors from people inside the department. They want it to wind up like Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles at Ohio State. Like that's how good that they think these guys can be because of how big and long and athletic they are, and just how physical they are at that size too, because they can line up all over the formation. Look at how Ohio State deploys those guys. They don't just play inside linebacker. They move them out to the outside. They let them rush the passer. They let them line up in that wide 9 technique and then drop into a quarterback spy and do so many different things. And when you have guys that are that big and long and can do that many different things for you, it just unlocks so much in a defense.
There's one guy I want to ask you about. He looked like he was going to go to UW, then he commits to UCLA. Now he's coming back to UW. He announced, I believe it was 2 nights ago as we're recording this. David Schwartzel. He said he's coming back. He's a 4-star edge rusher, I do believe. He's going to be at UW. What do you expect from a guy like him, whether it's his freshman year, whether he has to redshirt? What is that extra talent that we didn't really expect to get, 2 or 3 days ago? Then he flips. What do you expect from him?
Yeah, he's a guy who I fully expect to redshirt from everything that I've been told. Where Washington, or if he was going to go to UCLA, he would have played edge rusher. At Washington, they want him to be a true three technique defensive tackle. So there's probably going to be at least a year, probably 18 months of just pure patience with a kid like that because he is talented. He's got a very high ceiling athletically, but he's not necessarily up to the weight that you want right now. He's 275 pounds. And when you have three other high impact guys along the defensive line, you can afford to be a little more patient with a kid like this. And you can say, all right, take your time, make sure you get bigger, get stronger, learn the defense, learn this brand new position for you. That's going to be very, very different than playing it at the high school level. So I really like the addition. That's just one where I'd say, definitely hold your horses a little bit if you're like, oh, hey, this is the guy that unlocks everything. I think that might take a little bit of time.
Yeah, and I'm really excited about this class because of what you mentioned. You're going to have the guys who play right away. Your Cody Greens, your Gavin Days, guys like that. But you also kind of have layers now. And I heard you talking about this the other day on Locked On Huskies, where you can say, oh, yeah, that's a junior. He came in as a freshman. He played his freshman year right away. He's been here for 3 years. Oh, that guy on the offensive line, he's a sophomore. That's John Mills. He's been here for 2 years. And now you're able to implement, and now we can kind of see the Jed Fish effect where you're bringing in talent, yes, through the portal, and yes, guys have stayed, but now it's just his third year bringing in talent to UW. So you have Demond Williams being his third year, and he's protected by a guy like John Mills, who was, a 4 or 5 star recruit coming in. Now he's on the offensive line, and on the other side of him, you have a 5 star freshman. So you kind of get this combination now of youth and experience, whereas in 2024, it was kind of just a lot of experience, like rag or snaggles who have either stayed at UW or they came from small schools. Kind of just I
It
wouldn't
was a
say poor
ragtag
put
group.
together. Yeah, a ragtag group, exactly. And so to have that, and then this year you have a little bit of consistency. You bring in a good recruiting class, and then to pair that with this year's 13th ranked class in the country, I'm really excited to see. And that's what I love about Jed Fish. And yes, you can drill him on the play calling, and there was rumors about maybe he's going to go to Florida or wherever. But I think when fans just have patience, and I get it, I'm not a patient person, but when you just take a minute and say, all right, he has the 13th ranked class in the country. That's the best ever. They're only going to get more resources. They're in Seattle. This team's only going to get better in years to come, or at least we hope. I think the sky's the limit for this UW team. Is that a fair thing to say?
Oh, absolutely. If you keep acquiring talent like this, with how this coaching staff has shown it can develop that kind of talent, then absolutely, where it's never going to be easy to compete with the top teams in this conference, right? The Ohio States, the Michigans, what USC and Oregon have been doing on the recruiting trail as well. It's going to be very difficult. Indiana, too, with everything that they've done in the last couple of years. My God. But when you're able to couple the high end coaching staff with the high end recruiting, all of a sudden, that's exactly what you need. And it's a really exciting thought because as the playoffs, I mean, we'll see if they expand again to 16, right? I have no faith in that, nor should they. But 12 is more than enough at this point in time. But as we continue to just see things expand and see more and more teams be able to acquire high end talent like this, because Washington shouldn't always will be near the top in terms of talent acquisition. And seeing where they are at this point in time is an exciting thought. And if you're able to continue stacking on this and building on this, Washington is going to be exactly what it should be, which is a consistent competitor for the college football playoff every year.
I completely agree. And I think this year, we talked about this throughout the season, and apparently it's going to come to an end because I don't think Vanderbilt's going to be in where you have a 10-2 team in the Big Ten or the SEC. More often than not, you feel like that should probably get you into the college football playoff, at least knocking on the door, unless those two losses are really, really bad, bottom of the conference teams. But I mean, if next year Washington goes 10-2 and they have losses to a really good Indiana team in Oregon, let's say, there's really no reason they shouldn't be in the college football playoff. With that being said, we have teams this weekend out of the Sun Belt and the American, playing for a chance in the playoff, and they're not in the top 25. But that is a completely different episode for another day. The last thing I want to talk about with our beloved Washington Huskies is next year's schedule. Probably within an hour of the Oregon game coming to an end, I was looking at this next year's schedule. What are the wins? What are the losses? What are the tough games? I want to kind of just preview a little bit of what next year is going to look like for Washington. They started out with the Apple Cup, which is disgusting. That should always be the last game
So
of the
weird.
year.
So
But
weird, man.
whatever. We're going to kick off the Apple Cup on September 5th at Husky Stadium. So it is what it is. The key home games: Indiana, Iowa, Minnesota, and Penn State. They get those all on Montlake. And then on the road, Michigan State, who just has a new head coach, Nebraska, Oregon, Purdue, and USC. So it's pretty balanced in terms of the difficulty, both home and away. We'll see what Penn State looks like. Minnesota is always a competitive team, and you know what you're getting from Iowa. It doesn't matter the name on the back of the jersey. You know exactly what that team is going to look like. The road games scare me a little bit. I'm not going to lie. I don't think Nebraska is a great team, but when you play them at Lincoln, it's a different environment. It's not an easy place to win. We know what Autzen Stadium is. We're not going to spend a lot of time about that. Purdue, we'll leave it there. And you go to the Coliseum for USC, which they're always a talented team. They always have a strong recruiting class. I actually think they have the number one recruiting class in the nation. Is that accurate?
That's right.
Yeah, so loaded with talent from top to bottom. What do you make of the schedule? Are there's games you like? Are there's games that scare you? Is this a favorable schedule for Washington? Just kind of when I list off those teams and whether it's home or away, what do you make of it?
I think this is a very, very favorable schedule where, you mentioned the Big Ten home games. Like Penn State is still in turmoil. It seems like they finally settled on their 27th choice at head coach, maybe in Matt
I think it was
Campbell.
28th. It might have been the
Oh,
28th
28. Yeah, that's
choice.
on me. That's my bad. I knew that. But it's still, I think that that's a very big part of this, right? We'll see what that looks like when the transfer portal comes around, how much of that talent might depart for the NFL draft. We know they had a lot of seniors that are certainly going to be leaving. So that could be a program in a bit of turmoil. Iowa, certainly a very different team on the road. As you said, though, very physical. Certainly an interesting matchup. Minnesota has always been a team where I'm kind of like, I'm not a huge PJ Fleck guy. So not necessarily one where I'm looking at it and saying, oh boy, coming into Husky, going to Minnesota, I'd be a little more concerned. But at Husky Stadium, I kind of like that matchup. Indiana, yeah, that's going to be a very, very interesting game. The road matchups like Michigan State, we've seen Washington go in and have no trouble there a couple of years ago. Purdue, yeah, we don't need to spend a lot of time on that one. The two games that I really am focused on, because I think Nebraska is a very interesting one. We'll see, what the transfer portal might look like for them this offseason as well. But when I look at these USC and Oregon games, those are the two games that are going to define this season. Because let's just chalk up, like, let's say the Indiana game is a loss, right? Let's just say that happens. All of a sudden, you need to split those games. I feel like you need to split those games either way at USC and at Oregon, because especially the Oregon game, like Jed Fish cannot get to 0-3 against the Ducks. That would just be a huge blow. And I feel like the fan base would lose some sense of confidence in him if that were the case. But if he keeps recruiting, keeps acquiring talent, everything else would look great. But that is just such a big black mark on his resume, just like it was for Dan Lanning in his first couple of years against the Huskies. So I feel like that's one of the things I'm looking at in that regard. And then I look at the game at USC. It's one of those things where we've seen not just Washington, but several other teams struggle when they have to traverse across multiple time zones. This is an opportunity for you to not have to do that against a team that's going to be equally young, that's probably going to be losing a whole lot of talent when you think about Jacoby Lane and Mekhi Lemon most likely going to the draft. I feel like Jaden Mayava is probably going to declare that's not insider information. That's just my educated guess at this point in time. And so then all of a sudden you look at how much they might be losing, having to break in a new quarterback, everything like that. That game is very, very winnable. And it can also be a statement win because we've seen USC get propped up by rankers and the committee and everything like that. So if you're able to go down and make a statement in Los Angeles like that, I feel like that would just be a major boost for you for the college football playoff.
Yeah, not only that, but then when you look at this team and where their toughest games are going to be, it's likely on the road. And I think that plays a favor when you get to the end of the year and you say, hey, we went to Oregon and we beat them at Autzen Stadium. We went to USC and we picked up a win at the Coliseum. And then if you can squeak past, the Indianas, say you're in a nail biter with Iowa, if you can win those games, you're going to put yourself in prime position heading towards the end of the year. Roman, the last thing I want to talk about before we get out of here are New England Patriots.
Yes.
Yes, for those listening, we're probably the only two people in the world with a Washington Huskies and New England Patriots fandom, but that's the way it is, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
We are
New
proud of
England,
that.
without a doubt, it's the Dogs on Saturday and the Pats on Sunday, all weekend, every weekend. The Patriots are 11-2, and it's December. They have 4 games left. 3 of them are divisional games. They got the Bills, the Ravens, the Jets, and the Dolphins. At worst, I think 2-2. At best, I think they can win out, finish the year. That would be 15-2. I don't think anyone saw this coming. I would have been happy to win 8 games and be ninth in the AFC this year, just with how
Sure.
much new talent and how many new faces. There's a bunch of different questions, but we are running low on time. I'm just going to start it off. Are we going to go to the Super Bowl?
Yes,
Because I feel like it
absolutely.
might
I'm
happen.
all in. I am all in on this. There is no reason that with how well Drake May is playing, how good this defense is, especially when you think about that it's going to get healthy down the stretch. You're going to get Milton Williams back. Will Campbell's going to be back. The offensive line is going to be fine. It's going to be healthy. There's no reason that the Patriots cannot be the team that comes out of the AFC. Like I look around it, like the Broncos, yeah, they have a good defense. I'm not necessarily worried about that offense in a close game against a good defense. We saw what they looked like against Washington. Like I've seen it several places. The Legion of Whom defense, as they like to call it, which I absolutely love. Like I look at the AFC North, that's just kind of a disaster at this point in time. Like it's probably going to be the Ravens. And is anybody confident in that with how they've looked and how hurt they've been this year? I'm certainly not. And then the AFC South, Daniel Jones has a broken leg. Like he not only does he have a broken leg, like the Texans are good. Like the Texans are probably the team I'm most concerned about right now, especially with the fact that the Chiefs, there's a good chance they miss the playoffs at this point in time. I look around the AFC right now and it's as wide open as it's ever been. There's absolutely no reason that the Patriots can't come out of this with the way we've seen them improve in just every facet of the game this year.
I'm glad you brought up the various teams in the AFC because I was listening to, I believe it was probably ESPN the other day, and they talk about, oh, well, if the Chiefs get in, you watch out, or who's going to come out of the AFC South, or is it going to be Baltimore? Is it going to be Pittsburgh? Can Cincinnati pull something, a miracle off with Joe Burrow now that he's back? The biggest thing for me is that even if you don't get the 1 seed, say you have to go to Denver for AFC
Sure.
Championship game, there's just nothing that really scares me. And that's not to say there's not talent throughout the AFC, but if it's, oh no, we have the Jaguars coming to town, okay, perfect. If it's, oh,
Exactly.
Kansas City got it, I'm just not scared of whoever we have to play. Sure, I would much rather play the Broncos in Foxborough, but if it's Bo Nix in the game with a chance to go to a championship, we've seen how that movie ends in college. So I'm not really worried about it in the NFL either.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. That's the thing where you said it perfectly with the Jaguars. It's kind of like, oh, okay. Like there aren't super teams at this point in time. Like the Rams are probably this close to being one with a top 10 overall pick coming in, but that's a whole different podcast. I like the entire AFC is full of teams with talent. The entire AFC is full of teams that could make a run. But that's why you and I are going to sit here as Patriots fans and be this confident, is because with how well Drake May is playing, with how well this team has gelled under Mike Vrabel, with just all of the other factors around the conference, there is absolutely no reason that you should look at the Patriots and just write them off at this point in time. And anybody who is, and anyone's like, oh, it's the schedule, it's this, it's that. It's, yeah, sure. Absolutely, the schedule plays a factor in being 11-2, but they also went to Buffalo and beat the Bills. Like, it's not like they haven't won against good teams this season, and you also still have to beat the teams in front of you, which, by the way, for the last, what, Carter, 4 years now, or 4 of the last 5, you weren't doing that. You weren't beating those bad teams. And that's why you were picking number 3 overall to get Drake May and picking number 4 overall to get Will Campbell. That's what puts you in that situation. And a lot of that at the end of the day, I know I keep saying his name, it has to come back to Mike Vrabel, because the talent acquisition has certainly been awesome. Like paying up for Milton Williams has been tremendous. Whoever else you want to say, right? Carlton Davis has been a nice acquisition. Getting Stephon Diggs has really changed this wide receiver room. I was not high on that acquisition at all, by the way. I was kind of like, all right, I wanted Chris Godwin. I wanted T. Higgins. And obviously those things didn't happen. But it's all just worked out the way that it was supposed to. And it's been great because now, even if Stephon Diggs does wind up just staying in New England for a year, looking at how Drake May has evolved, this Patriots team is not just set up for a one-time run. This is a young team that has a very, very bright future ahead of it.
Final question in 10 to 20 words or less. Is Drake May the MVP?
Yes. That's only one
Only
word is
one
needed.
word.
It's yes.
Well, there we go. There is your final answer. Roman, I want to thank you so much for taking time. I know things are super busy right now between the end of the regular season and recruiting and UW basketball. I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on the pod, man. We really appreciate it.
Carter, it's always a pleasure to be here. I'm always happy to be on.
Where can our listeners find you, whether it's your writing or your podcast, what might be coming up in the future? Where can we go find you at?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on all forms of social media at Tomashoff 34. My podcast, Locked On Huskies, is on all forms of podcasting: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, all that and the like. Please make sure you subscribe, and then you can find all my written work at uwhuskieswire.usatoday.com.
That is going to do it for today's show. Once again, I'm Carter Stedman. He is Roma Tomashoff. Hopefully, you're hearing more from us in the future. But as for now, that is going to wrap it up. Thanks for listening. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Enjoy championship weekend in college football, and we'll talk to you guys more next week.